Hello people, your boy Kojamain is back with another deck showcase, and this one is very cool. We're playing Gulrang. If you watched my previous video where I reacted to Altered TCG's hero tier list, you know that Gulrang is one of my personal sleeper picks for Beyond the Gates. The hero is very strong, but not many people are talking about her because, if we're being honest, she's overshadowed almost completely by the other two Ordis heroes. Waru is considered by many to be the strongest hero of the first set, and his deck, the Bureaucrat's deck, is the deck to beat in the meta right now. And Sigismar is the Ordis starter hero. Not only that, his ability is very easy to use, and he's extremely strong in limited formats. With all that stuff happening around these two other Ordis heroes, most people are forgetting about Gulrang, but that is a big mistake. This lady is absolutely cracked. Her ability boosts all tokens you create, which turns all the 1/1 recruits you make into big threats. Now this skill comes with a hefty drawback, namely that while you have less than 8 mana, all of these tokens will get Defender, which means that you basically can't progress your expeditions at all until very late in the game. But don't be fooled, it's more than worth it. What Gulrang allows you to do, basically, is play a strategy that is extremely defensive. It's what would be called turtling in an RTS. You're stalling the game until very late, where you eventually overwhelm your opponent with an absolutely massive army. To do that, we have all the tools at our disposal that Ordis has for creating tokens and making them strong, especially the 3 landmarks, Ordis Carrier, Monolith, and the often neglected secret tech, Brassbuck Hub, which we're getting over from Axiom out of Faction. But what really pushes this deck over the top is that there are so many cards in Ordis that on their own are already good, but with Gulrang they're insane. Ratatoskr and Ordis Gatekeeper are 2 examples of this. In a normal Ordis deck, these just come with a little extra of a 1/1 recruit or 2, but in a Gulrang deck, these cards suddenly put incredible power on the board. Ratatoskr from Reserve is a casual 5/5/5 for just 3 mana. Actually, with Monolith in play, make that 8/8/8 for just 3 mana. Are you hearing this? Same thing with Gatekeeper. You also have Open the Gates, that's another 8 power for 5 mana, or a ridiculous 12 power with Monolith in play. And the absolute queen of our deck is Jeanne d'Arc, who has the same effect, except that it's attached to a character on top of it all. If you've seen any of these cards look good in any other deck, you will not believe the kind of power they can deliver in a Gulrang deck. And yes, for the first couple of turns, we'll only be able to use this power to defend. But once we reach round 6, which is not hard to do, it's over for our opponents. So yeah, that's the idea of the deck. You can find the complete deck list in the wrap-up section later in the video, or as a link in the description. Now with the intro all sorted out, let's see those games. We're in game 1, and this Akesha opponent does not know what she's in for here. Our opening hand is looking pretty cool. You'll love to see none of our expensive late game cards here, because it would be a shame to have to put those into mana. Now, Ordis Cadets looks like a great early play. The token gets boosted by Gulrang's power, so you get 3/3/2 worth of sats, but it's not necessarily what you want to play in the first round as the starting player, because we can't progress with that power since the token is Defender. So Akesha would just play something small to the other expedition and win the round. If we're going second, it would be a good response, but it's not good going first. And the Ozma, well, you hate to play her without drawing the card, so we can either slam our Gatekeeper right away to sort of lock down the first round completely, or play one of these spies. Obviously that's not ideal, since you waste the Sabotage, but as a first round play versus Akesha, it's pretty decent, I thought. Or the spy wins the side versus common Baba Yaga, for example. So worst case, the round is probably an even trade, and we can keep the Gatekeeper in hand for later. So with that being my plan, these are the cards that I benched, even though looking back on it now, I think I'd rather have kept the Ozma than the Cadets. So we play the Spy first without sabotaging, and Akesha replies with a Studious Disciple. Now here's to hoping that's all she has this round. I pass, but she's not done. She fires off you go. Pretty good use of 2 mana there to cost us an entire progression, while she takes 1 with just a Disciple. Unfortunate for us, yes. The Gatekeeper probably would have handled that round a bit better, but oh well. 1-0 for her, and we go into round 2, where we get another Spy and another Ozma. Basically exactly the cards we benched in the first round. Here I definitely let go of the Cadets. The question is just whether to make use of the Sabotage from Ordis Spy or to play Gatekeeper. Normally you'd expect Akesha to just after you here, using her hero power, but she uses the the opportunity immediately to sabotage our spy in reserve with Tooth Fairy. Now, again, here, the Gatekeeper probably succeeds in locking down that round, even against the Studious Disciple still coming in from reserve. But I was really looking to combo Gatekeeper with Ozma in the following round, so I didn't want to play it here. Instead, I went with the second spy, sabotaging Off You Go, even though that obviously concedes one progression to our opponent, since she can just take the companion side with Disciple. Against any other opponent, keeping one mana open might work as a bluff to keep her from playing the Disciple into whatever I might have for 1 mana. But of course, being Akesha, she can just after you, unfortunately, and force me to show my hand. And after I have to pass, it's clear that the coast is clear for her to play out the Disciple with no problem. So all in all, the round is an even trade with 1 progression for either side. As you can see, it's not impossible for Gulrang to score progressions early. And in fact, I'd say pay attention to get these kinds of progressions with non-token characters whenever you can, because if you just always try to flood the board with tokens, you might put down way more power in some cases, but you'll also never progress in the early game. So once you get to 8 mana, you'll have an even bigger deficit to make up for. Round 3, our draws are Open the Gates, our little Jeanne d'Arc in a bottle, and a Monolith. Both very strong cards, but also expensive. We've somewhat already planned out this turn to be Gatekeeper plus Ozma, but now I'm getting second thoughts about it, and I think I might just rather slam Monolith instead. The earlier we get that thing down, the better. It will definitely cost us a double progression though, so it comes at a very high price, but since Akesha has only progressed twice so far, it looks like we might be able to afford that. After thinking about it for a while, I decided to go for it. Obviously this makes the round extremely free for our opponent now, but I had a feeling it would be worth it in the long run. So Akesha just plays her stuff as expected, including a rare Hua Mulan, which is a really cool choice for the deck that you don't often see, and she takes both expeditions this round, making the score 4-1. Now with this Jeanne d'Arc withdrawn for round 4, we have even more gas, and I'm really confident now that we can hold this game. I benched the second Ozma, even though I'd like to keep it, but with Gulrang you really have to always bench something. There is no way you're delaying your 8th mana any longer than you have to. And there's no ramp in Ordis. Akesha starts this round off with Banishing Gate on our Monolith. Not gonna lie, that hurts. Especially because playing it was a full round for us, but removing it is not a full round for her now. She can still play out Hua Mulan to whatever expedition we don't contest and get another progression here. So we have 2 options. Playing Jeanne d'Arc and basically agreeing to a 1-for-1 trade of expeditions this round, or playing Gatekeeper plus Ozma to flood the board with power and prevent her from progressing, but there are 2 problems with that plan. Firstly, we would overload our reserve. So drawing 1 from Ozma isn't as strong since we'd have to discard 1 from reserve in turn, and secondly, I doubt our Akesha opponent would even play the Mulan at all, so there's really no point. I decided to go for playing Jeanne, and Akesha made me pass before committing her Hua Mulan as I had anticipated, making the round an even trade as expected. So we both progress, but while her Mulan just goes back to reserve, we get an army of recruits of Jeanne d'Arc, which are all boosted by Gulrang to make them 2/2/2s. Very powerful. Imagine how crazy this would be if Monolith was still in play. So we're starting this next round with a lot of power already on the board. But even now, we're not at 8 mana yet, so we need to play defense for 1 more round. I benched the Ordis Cadets here, since it's too late in the game for them, and I use my first turn to get this Brassbug Hub in play. That's another really powerful landmark for Gulrang, as I mentioned in the introduction. Paying 1 to get a 3/3/3 bug up to 3 times is very good. Our opponent places her Mulan again on the hero side. By itself that doesn't do much, but it's somewhat signaling that she wants to contest that side. So with our remaining mana I decided to reinforce there with Jeanne d'Arc, setting up to get the same army as this round in the following round as well, where we'll be able to push for progressions for the first time. Either that additional character convinced our opponent to not commit, or she was bluffing from the start, but in either case Akesha just drops an Ordis Carrier here. Normally that's one of her most important pieces to win easy expeditions, but against our constant flood of extremely strong tokens, I'm not worried about this at all. I pass, and the round ends with us winning both sides, so all in all there are no progressions for anyone, because as you know, Gulrang gives our tokens defenders, but that's all about to change now, as we head into round 6. Ratatosker and another Monolith are our draws here. And with activating Brassbug Hub, we will have 7 mana here, so I'm thinking Monolith and Ozma for this round. So I bench Rata, even though I really love that card in his deck. Akesha gets her 1/1/1 recruit at noon, and we pay 1 to get our boosted brass buck. Now, you might argue that you don't necessarily need to invest the hub charge here, but we have the mana to spare this round, and keep in mind that one single Kraken's Wrath is enough to remove a lot of our tokens. So I'd rather be safe than sorry. And it was a good decision too, since Akesha's first play in this round is another Banishing Gate, removing our hub instantly, so at least we used it once. She really is trying her best to keep our landmarks in check as much as possible, but it costs her 4 mana, so now she only has 3 left. I play our Ozma as planned, and we draw into Ordis Attorney. Not necessarily a very good draw here. Akesha passes the turn back to us with After You, and I use my remaining mana to place our second monolith of this game. Hopefully that one will last a bit longer than the other 2 landmarks we've played. Turns out that Akesha was just bluffing though, or maybe she's trying to save up to contest us more strongly the next round. But she passes here, so this round is a double progression for us. We can finally advance and immediately score 2 points here, bringing the game back to almost even right away. For our next draws, we get another Rata and an Isitok, which this deck runs in its common version. Very good to lock down opponents when they try to commit to a side, but I'm not sure we need this at this stage of the game. I decided to still hang on to it though, since this Attorney seems like a better choice to put into mana. Akesha gets her Recruit again, but we are on the play, so I start out with our Ordis Spy, coming into play thanks to Monolith and Gulrang as a whopping 6/6/6 power, and is even across 2 characters, so it's resilient to removal spells on top of it. Very powerful. Akesha's response is a tentative Baba Yaga, which is 2 power so far, and we're only contesting water on the hero side this round, so it's 2 to 6. My next play is the Ordis Gatekeeper on the companion side, for which sadly I managed to somehow lose the picture. So you'll have to imagine the Gatekeeper creating even more tokens on both sides here, which will all be 3/3/3s. But a bunch of them got removed right away, as Akesha spends all her remaining mana for a Kraken's Wrath, targeting everything on the hero side, so that in the end only the Gatekeeper and 1 token on the companion side remain, with our hero side completely cleared. Pretty strong for a removal spell, but it's no problem for us since Akesha had to tap out for that, so we just play our little squirrel, which comes into play boosted, making it a tie with Baba Yaga. Akesha has to pass, and we now have a choice between leaving that expedition as a tie and saving Ozma, or playing her, which is naturally much stronger, so I go for that, drawing into another Gatekeeper. You love to see that. Guys, that card is just so incredibly strong with Gulrang and Monolith in play. So after everything's done, that's another double progression for us. That makes 2 in a row, and as you can see, our opponent just cannot keep up at all with the massive amount of boosted tokens we are able to put out in this late game. Now, potentially the last round coming up here, and our draws aren't exactly strong. Jeanne d'Arc gives us that huge army only with a delay, and Paper Herald seems pretty useless at this point, but we still have 2 Ordis Gatekeepers ready to go from before. Akesha leads with 2 Ferry, sabotaging away our Rata. That's a pretty big hit to us, but it's only 1 of the 3 equally powerful threats we have. So I play out the first Gatekeeper, pushing us ahead in both expeditions, and putting a lot of pressure on our opponent to have another Kraken's Wrath here. Akesha uses After You, passing back to us, and I just go ahead with the second Gatekeeper. All in all, we're presenting 8 power on both sides, and more importantly, it's distributed across so many small characters that simple removal spells just won't cut it for our opponent here. At this point, Akesha is all out of options, and she's forced to reveal her play. It's Sakarabru. That pushes us back 1 step, but it's not enough, because we're still set up to win both expeditions yet again, so at the end of the day, even though we take the Sakarabru hit, we still take 2 progressions, and with that, the game. There is just no stopping this army once it gets going. Okay, now this is game 2, and guys, this one was crazy. In this game, you can see what could be the only weakness of our deck and how we can match up against it. But first things first, our opponent is Subhash. Some say the little brother of Traced, but I'm not so sure. Yes, Traced is incredibly strong, but Subhash just as much so. We're playing a slow deck, and that gives Subhash a relatively easy time getting into the game. We'll see how it goes, but for now, we've got an opening hand that's full of beautiful early game threats. It's very hard to decide what to keep here. One big question, do you want to stick to just one of the Brassbuck hubs, or do you want to keep both? In this game, I decided to actually keep both, so we're holding on to only the Paper Herald and those two landmarks, hoping to snatch an easy progression with the Herald in round 1, and then letting our infinite Brassbucks carry us toward the later game. By the way, this game is all about at noon triggers. So for this game, I'll try to go a bit slower through all of these different actions instead of mostly glossing over that like I usually do. Keep in mind that if both players have triggers at noon, those of the active player will trigger first. And that is actually a disadvantage in many cases, as you'll see in this game. So Subhash doesn't waste any time. His hero power allows him to pay 1 mana at noon to put a card from his hand into reserve to create a Brassbuck. He goes for that right away, and not only does he get the bug, he also reveals Coppelia. Yes, that's right, the infamous Axiom signature play of Beyond the Gates right at the start of the game, before the first round even starts. So he gets to put Coppelia into play for free, in addition to the Brassbuck. And that wasn't even his turn, just the noon trigger. For his actual turn, he ups the psychological warfare one more time by playing his own Brassbuck hub. Oh no, he's got the same idea as us! All in all, it's just about the best turn 1 you could imagine for a Subhash deck. He absolutely went all out right away. Now that we got the rest of the round for us, I play out our own hub and then, after he passes, snatch the companion expedition with our Paper Herald. I mean, I didn't expect the Coppelia right away, but generally speaking, that round went basically as I'd hoped. We got the progression we wanted and our hub is in play. For round 2, we're looking at Rata and Ordis Attorney as our draws. Ordis Attorney wins over Coppelia, but there are a couple of problems. We wouldn't trigger its ability if we use it to win an expedition, and there's also the additional Brassbucks from Hub and Subhash's ability to keep in mind. As I said, with us being the starting player this round, we'll place our bug first, and then our opponent gets to perfectly counter it, which is a big problem. Besides, I kind of wanted to play our second hub this turn, so I ended up benching the Attorney here. Now, at noon, it doesn't really matter where I put my bug, because even though it gets boosted by Gulrang, Subhash will just counter it with his 2 normal bugs. The card he reveals for his hero power is Haven. That is really bad news for us. That card is just so strong. I mean, it's the Bravos Bastion, what did you expect? For my turn, I first discard Paper Herald to make a recruit, with the Gulrang boost that counters Coppelia nicely, and then play out our second hub. At this point, we have 1 mana left to play Rata, but I'd rather not, since we have tokens present in both expeditions, so we won't be able to progress this round anyway. That being said, we'll have to get Rata into reserve to make use of its more powerful side eventually. Maybe it'll fit nicely to play it here. Subhash uses his 2 remaining mana to bring Haven into play, and resupplies Amelia Earhart, which is another really good hit from his deck. Now, with the Hero Expedition being 3 versus 4 in power, placing Rata there after all seems like a very good use of our time. We stop Subhash from progressing and get Rata into the reserve. With that, the round is a complete tie, with no progressions for either player. And we go into round 3, where we see Ozma and Jeanne d'Arc. Both really nice cards to see at this point. You could think about going for paying 2 to get 2 bugs and then play Ozma here. But that would imply that you're benching Jeanne d'Arc, and that's pretty insane. She's basically the best card in our deck, so I ended up going with her over Ozma. At noon, our Subhash opponent pays his usual fees of 1 hub charge plus 1 mana, and an additional mana plus dropping 1 card to get the 2 Brassbucks. The card he reveals is Tinkerbell in this case, which puts us in a very unfortunate position. Subhash is the starting player, so he will be able to sabotage here, but we need to know whether Rata will be sabotaged or not in our noon phase, since we have to decide whether we can spare the 2 mana for Brassbucks or not. If we spend it and then he sabotages, we're left with no other plays and lose an expedition. Obviously we can't risk that, so we're forced to not activate our 2 hubs this round. Very unfortunate, but I guess the charges will come in just as useful later on, so that's a silver lining. After our opponent goes through with the sabotage, they're tapped out, so for us there's no risk in tying the companion side without Jeanne, resulting in 1 progression overall for our opponent and us getting the Jeanne d'Arc army for the next round. And with this gigantic board presence already in place for round 4, it doesn't hurt much that we're seeing a bit of a weaker draw here. The Ordis Carrier is obviously a core piece of our game plan normally, but in this situation it's awkward to play since we already have the 2 hubs. So I ended up benching it here. This way we can just play Jean one more time, which hopefully gets us safely to 8 mana. I activate one of the hubs with the spare mana, and to my surprise, our opponent opted to activate nothing at all during noon this round. No hub and no hero power. That gives me the strong impression that he's planning to slam Brassbug Hive here. Unfortunately, there's not really anything we can do about that. But on the bright side, it makes it completely safe for us to just go ahead with playing Jeanne d'Arc here. So as expected, here's the Hive. And with both of us tapped out, that's the end of the round. We win both sides, so no progressions for anyone overall. The game's heating up. We're heading into round 5. Just one more and we can start making progress of our own. The question is, will Subhash be ready? For our draws, we're looking at another Ozma and Monolith. This is a hard choice. Monolith is not as strong as Brassbug Hive, but it's pretty essential to us in the grand scheme of our game plan. I hate to put Ozma into mana for the second time here. This is a spot where I'm really not sure what the correct play is. You have to drop one of these 3 cards. What would you do? Keep Ozma? It's true that she immediately replaces herself in your hand because she draws, but surely you can't lose Monolith. It's tough. In the game I opted to bench Ozma. Subhash gets his 2 bugs at noon. Now they're both boosted, and he even manages to again reveal a Coppelia for his hero power, so that goes straight onto the field as well. These 2 bugs are overpowering our tokens on the hero side, so I used charges from our own 2 hubs to counter with bugs of our own there. That leaves us with enough mana to play Monolith, but before we can do that, Subhash makes his play, and it's a second Brassbug Hive. The nightmare scenario has come true. Subhash with 2 hives in play. That's basically the best spot he can be in. So it's looking pretty grim. But we're finally heading into round 6, and after all this preparation, we're now starting the real fight. Now let's see who takes it between the full force of our army with 2 bonkers draws here, or Subhash with 2 Brassbug Hives in play. Having 8 mana lines up nicely either with hub activation plus both gatekeepers, or Jeanne d'Arc plus a gatekeeper, or Jeanne d'Arc plus a hub activation. I'm not sure which is best, but keep in mind that our opponent's Brassbugs are all 4/4/4, so they match ours. At noon, I decided to not spend our hub charge yet and instead go for the 2 cards from hand. I was thinking we might trade expeditions and set up for a strong next turn this way. Subhash presents very close to 8 power across the entire board though. These hives are so incredibly strong. At this point I'm realizing that we'll need a removal spell for at least one of them, and fast. So I play out Jeanne, still hopefully keeping our opponent somewhat in the dark about what we're trying to do here, but if I'm doing my math right, we actually can't win anything this round. Our best shot is to tie the companion side, but that will be without considering anything he might be doing. Our opponent places a Haven here, maybe for the resupply, maybe he just wants to play it slow, and it's very effective here. We're forced to reveal our hand, but the thing is, now there's no point in even playing the Gatekeeper. It will just be countered by one of the opponent's reserve cards. So I have to pass. This really hurts, guys. Subhash scores a double progression here, seemingly without even spending much of his resources at all. Those Brassbug Hives are completely running the show for him. And his hero power, I guess. The synergy is very strong. Okay, a new round, and we continue to draw good cards, but nothing that deals with hives. This is really bad. I keep all the cards, and Subhash gets his army again, revealing for his hero power another Coppelia. Is this the 3rd one? Incredibly lucky. And since he's the starting player, we can also kiss our Jeanne d'Arc goodbye. That gets sabotaged instantly. At this point, I'm thinking that with Isetok, I can luckily shut down one of the sides, and he might not see that coming. So I slow play with Ozma, although looking back I'm liking her more on the companion side in this situation. We draw into another Monolith. That's nice and all, but we won't have time to deploy that. In the meantime, Subhash adds yet more power to both sides with Foundry Armor. That card looks really strong for him. But he's walked right into my trap. Playing Isetok on the right beats him out 11 to 9 power. Note that Isetok should have gotten a boost from Monolith here, but it doesn't matter. And the left side gets completely blocked by Isetok's ability. Looking good. We actually hold the fort this round and score a single progression against this onslaught of robots here. I like seeing a second Isitok here as our draw for the next round. That almost seems like our best character for this kind of situation. In principle, our token from Brassbug Hub can keep Coppelia in check, but there are two problems. Since we're the starting player, our opponent will be able to place their tokens after us, and as you can see, I accidentally placed an Ordis Recruit token, when in reality this should have been a Brassbug. In the end, it didn't make much of a difference though, don't worry. So after Subhash has placed his army, I start out with Isitok's reserve ability, although I'm not sure if that's even a good play. Giving up an Isitok for a random card in our deck seems like it will most likely trade down. But I was so desperate to find anything that could deal with at least one of these hives that I was ready to take that risk. We got an Ordis Gatekeeper for it. Now for my play this turn, I place the new hub, and Subhash responds with the Ogun from his reserve that he had put there via his hero power at the start of the round. Note that this is the rare Ogun, so our opponent could have paid 2 extra mana to make another bug, but as it stands they don't, and this Ogun nonetheless represents basically 4 additional power added to the board for 2 mana. Myself, I'm taking comfort in the fact that at least we'll only lose one side this round due to our Isitok. I wasn't sure this would work, given that Subhash still has 5 mana open, and as it turns out, our opponent immediately turns the situation around with Hooked, the Axiom Trickshot, pulling our Isitok over to the left, but if you think about it, that doesn't really change much. The only difference is that it allows their hero expedition to move out of that tricky only water region. This is another round where this Subhash deck just looks so insanely strong. They were able to easily deal with what I put down, and they even have 4 mana left over. Note that at the end of this round, I needed to discard one of the landmarks. I forgot about that, but obviously I just discard the hub without counters, so that doesn't make a difference really. Now, the game is getting into territory where we could just lose outright if we have one bad round. Our draws are Spy and Ratatoskr. I felt like the Spy could have merit against that Hooked, but it's not our top priority to remove that, and Rata will only trigger when played from reserve, so it's too slow here. For his noon triggers, Subhash again places 2 bugs on the hero side and 1 additional bug on the companion side via his hero power, revealing a Boom from hand. That gave me the impression we might have to say goodbye to our monolith here. Again, I made the same mistake as before, where I activated Brassbug Hub, but I placed a Recruit token instead of a Brassbug. It didn't matter before, but it might matter here, since now we're not evenly matched on that side. Subhash starts around with his own Jeanne d'Arc. That's the star of our deck, but he's running it too, the Axiom version, which creates Brassbugs instead of Recruits. Looks like our opponent is sort of accepting to have a bit of a weaker round in exchange for really putting down power next round to close out the game, but they still have the Hooked available, so I decided to play the Ordis Spy to deal with that and hopefully force them to pass, which indeed happened. So now our task is to see how much we can get with our remaining 6 mana. Now I was thinking we could just play out the 2 gatekeepers and win both sides, but we would be using all of our gas, and when Subhash's Jeanne d'Arc tokens come down the next round, we will definitely lose the game. I needed to keep something back, so I decided to go with Isitok here. That accomplishes everything we need, and it's essential that we keep as much power in reserve as possible. So here we are. The Jeanne army is here. Now by itself that doesn't look too bad, but keep in mind that the bugs from the 2 hives and Subhash's ability will be coming on top of these. So we're looking at Subhash having roughly 12 or more power on either side already present before he even starts playing any cards. It really does look completely impossible, especially with these draws, Paper Herald and Ordis Carrier. This is an absolute disaster. Both of these are practically useless. I summon my measly token, again accidentally using the Recruit instead of a Brassbug, and here comes Subhash with his flood of robots. He's presenting 16 power on the hero side and 12 on the companion side. Granted, each of our gatekeepers can put down great power by themselves too, but not that much. Besides, even if we can match this board, it doesn't account for the cards in our opponent's hand. So at this point, I just went ahead and conceded the game. I didn't see a way out of this one. So there you have it, guys. The only way to beat the massive army this deck can put out is to put out an even bigger army. And somehow Subhash was able to do that in that game. Having 2 Brassbug hives in play is just absolutely devastating. and we didn't draw a single way to deal with them the entire game. Now, after that game, I rechecked the deck list, and to my shock, to my horror, I realized something. The reason we didn't draw a removal for those hives that game is because there are no removal spells in the deck. None. None. This is obviously a massive oversight on my part. I don't know what happened there. I think when I put together the first draft of this deck, there were so many cards that had obvious strong synergies with our hero that the deck was just done as soon as I had added all these. And I just forgot to even look at options for spells. So that is an obvious problem. If you build this deck, you should definitely replace either the Paper Heralds or the Attorneys or the Ordis Cadets with Sticky Note Seals. That's the bare minimum. Sticky Note Seals sadly doesn't hit Haven, but I don't think you have many alternatives because all the other options are rare. I'm thinking of Keylon Burst. But what do you even cut? There's no rare you want to cut here. They're all super strong. Another option you could consider is playing Teamwork Training, which is available to us at Common. But personally, I think that card is just really bad, so I would stay away from it. Well, there you have it, people. Personally, I think Gulrang is one of the strongest heroes in Beyond the Gates. I mean, you saw how much we had going on and how strong our tokens were. The Subhash game was a loss, but only because I didn't put any removal in the deck. So yeah, I can definitely recommend this archetype, especially if you ended up pulling one or two Ordis uniques that create tokens. Just cut the Ordis Cadets or something and your deck will get a massive power boost from those uniques on top of how strong it already is. Definitely try it out for yourself if you get the chance. And tell me in the comments how you'd set it up. Which cards would you cut for more removal? And are there any other bangers that I missed? Guys, thanks for watching. This was Gulrang, a video that took me ages to make. I was very sick for a couple of days in the middle of it, but here it finally is. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll be back as soon as I can with the next one. See you then.